All right, so we're going to do some Capex planning. This is important to, if you're doing a project like this, maybe you'll get some steps or some tips on planning for a capital expenditure. That's what Capex stands for, is capital expenditures. Project that you're working on, or if you're looking to do more passively, understanding the logic and the method of how the sponsors, the managers should be going through Capex planning. So we're just going to go through quickly some of the things that we do and how we do it, and how the whole business plan comes together. So first, it comes with we start what's called a PCR, a property condition report. Many of you have done single family houses. You know what this is. It just has a different name in the commercial in the commercial space. PCR is your home inspection. It just costs a lot more. So a typical PCR costs about $5,000, and that will be what the engineer, and it's usually done by an engineer versus like a home inspector. So an engineer or an engineering team, they'll go and go to the commercial property, inspect it, tell us all the things that are wrong with it, the lifespans and everything there, stuff that's out of code or out of compliance. If it's in a flood area, or if there's possible zoning issues, that they will be able to identify all of these things in what's called the PCR. And one of the cool things we get is out of the PCR, and depending on who you go through, is their executive summary. Oh, look, you already have it up. Great. So we have their executive summary, and this is the engineer's opinion on what the cost to bring the property from the current state up to like perfect market condition where there's nothing wrong. They like fix every single thing that's wrong. I like this company that we use here. This is Fivefold, by the way. They're national if you're ever interested in using them. This sheet here, they use a software that slips my mind, but they have a software that will automatically pull, and it updates itself depending on which region they're in, but it'll pull the cost of parts and labor for various jobs. So it's just a big database, and they can plug in, windows, 400 windows, and it'll spit out, an average price. That system tends to be pretty conservative. So how that benefits us is that you can see these prices, $786 to $1.1 million. We can use that to go negotiate a seller credit or a reduction in price from the sellers, the brokers, because we have this objective third party that inspected the asset, gave us a big long report. This one is 99 pages, this report that Duke has up here. So 99-page report with an opinion of value or opinion of price to renovate it, and their opinion again is usually on the higher side. So where they're saying 786 to 101, realistically it's probably like a 500 to 600K job. Okay. All right, so then we take this and then we go and we start gathering bids. Another thing we do is when you're doing multifamily inspections, you have to do as much work as you can to try to get as many inspectors there on the same day as possible, because with a 100-unit apartment complex, that's a lot of disturbing the residents there, and people, owners and brokers, they absolutely hate it. They're going to make it as difficult as possible for you to get any kind of re-access. Like, you can't go there and have the PCR in one day and then 3 weeks later have the electrician come, and then a week later have the plumber come, and it doesn't work like that. They want everything done on that day or very close to it. They don't want to keep disturbing the residents in that community. So to be proactive, and again, this goes into planning, you're going to schedule your PCR, get that date, and then you're going to schedule as many subs as possible for that same exact date. For our team, we usually have, again, the PCR. We have Steve will fly out for us. He's a licensed home inspector, so he'll fly out for us as well. And then I'll be there most of the time, and then we'll have an electrician, an HVAC specialist, a plumbing specialist. If there's anything that we've seen like doing our drive-bys and our walk-arounds that like, okay, maybe we need a roofer out there, maybe we need a GC out there, any kind of subs like that, we will have on site on that day, because we'll have that whole day and they can go into every unit and get everything done on that day. All right, so that's the PCR, that first piece of thing you need, and then get all the inspections out there, the inspectors. Once that is done, then you have the report back, then you need to start gathering and organizing bids. The way that we do this is we use a Google Drive folders. So every project that we're going to do, amenities or lighting or parking lots or whatever it is, we're going to have a folder for it on our Google Drive. And then we have myself and a VA, a virtual assistant, is going to go out and start gathering bids for each one of those line items that we've identified on our inspection, and then just keep pumping the bids into the Google Drive folder. Once we start getting a lot of them in, we'll start organizing them, putting them on an Excel spreadsheet and lining them up and going, testing them against each other, this bid, this HVAC contractor versus that one, kind of see who is the best value for the price. Maybe go back and try to trade them down a little bit on some of the line items. But if our average is about 2 to 3 bids for every project we do, unless we're using a contractor that we already know, we trust, we have a good relationship, we know that they're going to give us the best value. That like our dog park and playground guy, like we're not going to go back and try to find other people to compete with him. He's been great for us on like 3 projects now. So we're just going to give him that job. But you're going to go and organize everything, stratify all the bids, and try to figure out, okay, who's the best one we're going to go with. And then you start drafting your budget. Do you have a budget up, Duke? I have one if you want me to share screen.
No.
You want me to share screen?
Yeah.
All right. Screen one. All right, well, here's an example. So here is how we organize. And I know this is a little bit off topic, but it is important. So here's all of our properties here. Each one has a shared drive that we operate in. And then inside here, say we're working on Park Place. So Park Place, Capex, current bids. So here's the 2 bids for this, the siding and the windows, right? So everything's organized there. Here's the budget here, which is this document here. So once the PCR comes in, which is this right here, this is what we were just looking at. I start building the draft budget, get validated by the actual bids, and we start building this budget out. Once this budget is built, then we plug this into our underwriting and start testing it. How does, and we usually, once we're here, there's a lot of things that need to happen. It is to determine the viability of the business plan, the price, the return on investment for doing these CapEx things, because there has to be return on investment. Can't just pump a bunch of money in and not have some kind of return on that investment. So we're going to take this this money here. We're going to go plug it into the underwriting and see what that does to our returns. Okay, and like, okay, well, if this dropped the returns to this, or we need to see, okay, what can we expect rents to be or income to be if we're going to do all these CapEx, these capital expenditures, what can rents go up to, right? And then we're going to go check the comps and be like, okay, if we're going to reposition this C-class asset, this kind of shabby looking place, to the best, to compete with kind of the best property in town, the best apartment complex in town. Okay, that's going to cost us, $650,000 to do that, to reposition to that, to be one of the best properties in the town. Okay, what's the rent difference between our rent and their rent? Everything else being apples to apples. Okay, if we're at $600 rents and they're at $800 rents, I can reasonably say usually that we can get a $200 rent bump if we execute this CapEx. That's kind of the questions that we're going to ask ourselves as we go through this underwriting. And then once we're validated on the capital expenditures are going to yield a return on investment that's acceptable for the returns we're looking for, then we'll start going to we'll send this over to the bank to have them start underwriting using our CapEx, and they do their own thing as well. Pretty much the same thing we do. They do their version of it. They'll do a budget review to make sure the budget's adequate. They'll put it through their underwriters to make sure that this CapEx will yield, X returns for the asset as well. So they'll double check our work. Hasn't really been an issue in the past, but that is what's going to happen. So we have the draft budget, and then we go into actually planning it out. Was that was next on the slides? Was planning it out? Was that the next thing I had? I think so.
Yeah, so test CapEx plan against comps.
Yeah.
You want me to share again?
Yeah, just share for a second, and then I'll reopen back up to my next slide. Cool. So any questions yet? Great. All right, moving on. So we're going to take that CapEx budget, so we're going to test it in our underwriting, make sure the plan is viable, we can achieve these returns, we're going to get X rent bumps or income bumps from executing this CapEx plan. Now we need to actually start planning it. And the planning doesn't go into a vacuum, right? We don't, and we've learned this the hard way, and me and Steve are going to tell a story about this. And we're on that second bullet point here, is you don't just close a multifamily property that you plan on doing a reposition on and just start dumping money into it and just start fixing things up, start rebranding it and doing all this stuff with the old tenant base still there. So one of the issues that we had, and Steve I can hand it over to him, but I was going to tell him about the View, how we did all that work at the View, rebranded it, but still had the old residents that we were going to move out, the ones that were causing us problems, but we didn't move them out before we started doing all this stuff and all this rebranding. And then Steve, what happened to our online reputation for that?
Well, you'll get, you can get disgruntled tenants, residents, like stuff like junk that will kind of surface from, like, let's say prior management, or people that are unhappy that you're raising rents or whatever, and they can just go online and start bashing you online. So you kind of balance out, like, before we're just like that, like how Vince's point, like, okay, we're going to be super gung-ho, like rebranding, reposition everything, of course, because it's a new project, you're excited. But then too, yeah, you have to kind of sort through some of the existing tenant base, like really identify who are, how are the people going to respond, how are the residents going to respond to the changes that are being made on site, how are they responding to, let's say, rent increases, and you'll find out a lot of kind of junk can kind of shake out from prior management, or people don't like change, right? So yeah, that's something you want to be mindful of. And so that's something that we've implemented now, is delaying how much we rebrand, at least initially, until we can kind of get our legs underneath us, kind of get the ball rolling in terms of improvements to the property, make contact there, get new management to make contact with the residents on site, kind of alleviate any concerns and fears, because if not, they'll get knee-jerk reaction, right? And so, so yeah, that's something to be mindful of anytime you're going to take over a property. And, of course, when we're dealing with multifamily, like we're dealing with like larger properties, this is not a 2-unit complex, right? It's just not a duplex or a fourplex or something where it's like, well, your brand, let's say, is not necessarily so important. But when you're talking about a complex and we're spending money to redo signage, we're spending money on apartments.com, like, we're spending ad dollars to get, to drive traffic to our property. So, there's money that's going into rebranding, a property. So yeah, we had, residents that have not been happy with that. So, so lesson learned in that regard for sure.
Yep. No, thank you. So the lesson learned there, just summarize it, is you don't want to go in, close a property, and just start dumping and start fixing everything and rebranding it and put all nice shiny stuff in there with the residents that you plan on moving out, like
no.
the troublemakers and stuff like that, and move them out first, then change everything, because they're going to go online and just start bashing you. Your brand new page, your brand new website, your brand new Google, and everything like that. And then you're already starting with a fake tainted reputation. So the lesson learned there is when you start strategically planning how you're going to execute the CapEx, do it alongside the asset management and the lease management plans. And that's what we do now. So those go hand in hand now. So we close a property, we start doing lease management first of identifying at-risk residents, at-risk tenant base, people that we're going to have to evict. And we start doing all those first, and then slowly bringing on the CapEx. And the way we do that is I do a 2-phase. It used to be a 3-phase, but I've kind of shortened it up, leaned it up to 2-phase process. And I can take over the screen again, dude.
I'll just add something there real quick too, Vince. Because not only are you going to be screening those tenants as your part of your due diligence, whenever you look over the rent roll, I mean, obviously you're looking for delinquency and that kind of stuff, and that's easy. But when you're also doing your walkthroughs, like that's the time to try and identify, like, okay, unit 56, and unit 18, like we need to kind of get, move on from these folks, because you can tell, like, if you have one, let's say, bad or unkept unit, let's say in a building, that unit can easily turn into, oh man, like these people do not take care of this unit. This is going to cause, let's say if they're in an upstairs unit, that's going to cause leaks potentially if they're not taking care of their place into your downstairs unit. Now you got a problem with the downstairs tenant, or you have like pest issues, right? Okay, these people are not keeping their unit clean. They've got trash and stuff all over the place. Now they're going to have pests, they're going to have bugs, they're going to have roaches and all kinds of stuff in their unit. Well, guess what? That unit's connected to those units all around them. And that can cause you way more headaches. So that's something you want to be identifying as you're doing your walkthroughs, or you're doing your due diligence. I want to look at all the units, and you can start to make notations as well about, okay, these are problematic, or these potentially people that we want to kind of move on from the complex. So there's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a kind of dual approach. And everybody see my screen here, timeline strategy. We'll quickly go through this. So phase one, we get on the ground, we assess current operations. Then you're going to start implementing your management systems. And then we do the phase one CapEx we do is always going to be safety items. So remember, we have the PCR here, and we're going to, on our walkthrough, we're going to identify safety issues. It's always things that you're going to want to knock out immediately. Any kind of safety hazard type issues, the very thing, it's always going to be the first things you do. One, because it's the right thing to do. Two, because you're going to have an insurance person crawling on your property in any couple of weeks. They just show up unannounced and they'll be on your property. And then three, if you have any kind of slip and fall or anything like that post close, that's your problem now, even though that condition was there, previously before you close. So always handle the safety issues right away that you find during the inspections, right? And then we go through, and like I said, that lease management here is what I start developing alongside my lease management plan, which is the transition of the property. So we have our lease management plan here, and then you start building these the phase one. So project phase one here, you start mapping them all out. Okay, what's it going to be on the timeline? You start executing that, and then you go into phase two. And what this will do is that it really helps you line up and visualize and catch issues that you're going to run into with either manpower, funds. If you're on a construction draw, okay, before I start this amenity package, I'm going to need to finish this other project because I need a draw on it. So doing not just the budget like this, but also visualizing the timeline out. And what we use here at Gantt charts is now you can actually start planning when is something going to get done, why is it going to get done that time versus another time, and do I need to plan any construction draws? Maybe I need to vacate a bunch of units because we're doing something to the water, and you can start planning that with the leasing team. So all of that's important. All that goes into the CapEx planning. It's not just you go in there and you start dumping a bunch of money to a property and rehabbing it like a fix and flip. It's because you're in somebody's home, and in our case, I'm in 100 person's homes. So it takes a lot of planning and a lot of coordination to do this, especially with the high dollar amount as well. With construction draws, everything has to be in its right time, the right process. So we have our budget. You develop the budget with the contractors alongside the PCR, right? Then you start mapping it out, visualizing it on a timeline. and you work it in coordination with the lease management plan. The lease management, again, is when you take over a property, you're gonna have a bunch of tenants, and you have to start going down, getting them into the system and figuring out, okay, who's the good residents and who are the troublemakers that you want out. And then maybe you start working around that at the same time. Okay. What else do I have on that PowerPoint? What was next? All right, meeting with the contractors, managers for the takeover and execution. I can show you that. And then the pulse checks. Okay, I'll take back over. I probably should just have this up. That would have been way easier. All right. So what I have here is I have the execution plan. So this is the execution plan here for this asset here that we took over in Maryland, 59 unit in Maryland. We're turning it into a 64 unit. I have this, it's an abbreviated deal deck, but it's delivered to the property manager. So the property manager, the contractors, and the on-site and handyman is who I go over this meeting with. And you're going to go over, high level, why we bought the deal, making sure they understand what our vision is, what our business plan is. And then we go into the repositioned floor plans here. We're adding the different, I can walk through the business plan of what we're doing, why we're doing it. They see this, they have my executive summary here, and they have the Gantt charts like we just showed you, so they understand the timeline that I'm going to be holding them accountable to, and so they can start planning, notifying residents and things like that, getting stuff printed out, getting emails drafted for when we're going to start doing these projects. Maybe we're doing the parking lot and they need to start planning traffic plans and stuff like that. Or we're replacing siding, so they're going to have to notify 25 tenants in that building per week that people are going to be hammering on their walls for the next week. So you have to be very much in touch with the property manager so they can start planning these things out weeks ahead of time. And then what I do in this, the next start of this is the execution plan is the rents. Okay, like we're going to do all this stuff, and then here's what the rents are we're going to start charging. We have, here's our comps for this area. Here's kind of where we are currently. Here's where we want to be, the stabilized rents. And, we talk over that. And then I give them their execution plan. Okay, here is what we're going to start charging for rents and when we're going to start charging it. So it coincides with the renovation. So it coincides with that rebrand and that reposition that we're doing. Because, they have to go in hand. You can't do them in a vacuum. So we start upping rent slowly as we start executing the Capex plan, right? So we have Gen 1, Gen 2 rents and start planning all that out. Here's the pro forma, and then you give them their expectation. So I want a $47,000 a month NOI. That's my target. They know what we're going for. We're all rowing in the same direction. Here's the plan. Here's how we're going to get there. And here's the milestones, right? Here's the gross potential rent milestones that their leasing team needs to achieve. And here's the NOI that as a business, this asset needs to achieve in order to stay on the business plan. So that's what we go over. That is the execution plan. We do this alongside a takeover plan, which happens about 2 weeks out from takeover. Like say for our Park Place asset, that's going to be this week coming up because we close that in about 10 days. I'm the one in Johnson City. So this week I'm going to be doing this for that deal, going over the property manager and laying out this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And then we go into a pulse check. Pulse check is, let me pick one out here. I'll do the view. The pulse check is my weekly checkup. So they have the plan, they have the PowerPoint. Now we actually go into the asset management. Every single week, we will go over where they're at on executing every single one of those line items. So everything from the leasing aspect of it, but then also the rehabs. Okay, what units are rehabbed? What ones are in work? When were they done? What level of finish did they do? And then the KPIs here, the key performance indicators, making sure we're on top to hitting those NOI targets. So the important part to remember is Capex doesn't happen in a vacuum, like a flip, right? Where you're dealing with one door, nobody's living there, and there's no real rent, no real income targets. You just fix it, and then sell it. With a multifamily asset, there's a lot of moving parts, and you need to understand the relationship between each different project or each different field, and be able to think 2-3 steps ahead, especially on a timeline on if I do this now, how is that going to affect, this other thing over here? Or how is it going to affect the rents 3 months from now? So that is how we keep track of everything. And then the last piece of CRM here, which I recommend, is always having a project management CRM. For us, we use Asana, highly recommend it. You can put all of your projects in here. Like here's all of our properties here. And say, for example, I was just showing you Bay Street Estates. So I can show you the Bay Street Estates acquisition project. And it has all the steps here between us and the property manager. So set up Rhino, get utilities, transfer over the first 30-day checklist. Like I was saying, the safety walks, the water walks, looking for leaks, start the lease management plan. All of this stuff gets in here, and then all the CapEx checklist items in here. So as we start knocking off these CapEx items, we can go in here, put notes in, put change orders in, put timeline changes in, whatever it is, and then just finish them as they go. So staying organized, staying on track, having a plan, understanding the relationship to CapEx, to lease management, to the financials is very important. That is all I have on that. Any questions?
Everybody's like mind blown.
Oh, there's
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, CapEx planning is fun.
That's why we said earlier, thankless job right there. That's Vince. All right. Well, you guys can